This week on Illegal Aliens, Maria serves up a cherry coke that nobody ordered, Liz beats Max at pool, and Alex stares at Isabel.
Watch your step and stay out of the sweat lodge because we're looking at The Balance, episode 10 of season 1 of Roswell. I'm Claire.
I'm Chris, and this is Illegal Aliens, a Roswell podcast. The Balance first aired on December 15th, 1999.
It was written by Thania St. John, who we last saw writing on 285 South. This is the third of 7 Roswell episodes written by Thania, and she also has a story credit for the first season finale, Destiny.
And The Balance was directed by John Baring, who went on to direct for Charmed, Numbers, and The Vampire Diaries, and Arrow. Let's start the recap.
Liz is dreamily cleaning a milkshake machine when Max and Michael come into the crash down. Liz gives Max a cherry coke on the house, while Maria aggressively pushes another in front of Michael and demands to be paid. Michael is about to leave, but knocks over his drink and discovers a drawing of strange symbols as he's rescuing Max's books from the flood.
Back in his room, Max catches Michael and Isabel up on the full story of his visit to Riverdog, explaining that he kept quiet on the details because they were under FBI surveillance and insisting that Michael not go up to the reservation alone. Once Max leaves for a date with Liz, Michael tells Isabel that he's going anyway.
At the reservation, Michael meets Eddie and demands to see Riverdog. Riverdog is in the sweat lodge and Eddie reluctantly invites Michael in. But after Riverdog throws something into the fire, Michael begins to feel ill and runs back out of the lodge. Eddie follows, saying smugly that the sweat is intense.
Meanwhile, Isabel meets Alex at the crashdown, showing him a copy of the cave symbols, demonstrating how she can turn ketchup into something mustard-colored, and complaining that he's staring as if he's waiting for her to turn green and scaly. Over at the Chinese food place, Max and Liz play pool, flirt sweetly over fortune cookies, and dance. Then Maria shows up to tell them there's an emergency.
In the crashdown back room, Michael recovers from a fever, and Isabel insists that Max drive him home, right now. Alex wanders off dazed, and Maria insists on an ice cream bonding session with Liz, where they talk about alien kisses.
The next day, in the UFO Center, Alex tries to convince Isabel of a connection between the drawings in Riverdog's cave and Machu Picchu. When she tries to dismiss him, he uses his outside voice and gets told off by Milton for making insensitive alien jokes. Michael collapses in another part of the center. They hustle him up above the crashdown, where Maria starts fever treatment, and Michael manages to whisper, "Riverdog."
At the reservation, Eddie tries to send Max and Liz away, but Max refuses to leave until he can speak to Riverdog. While they wait, Max tells Liz how he met Michael and how they got separated before he and Isabel were found by the Evanses.
Isabel and Maria clash over who can best take care of Michael, but Maria spares a thought for taking care of Isabel, offering her a sandwich.
Max and Liz hear chanting from the sweat lodge and notice its similarity to what Michael was moaning as he was sick. Max is about to go into the sweat when Riverdog stops him and tells him to bring Michael and hurry. When Max and Liz get back to town, they find Michael lying very still, his body covered in white webbing.
In the cave, Riverdog tells another story of his alien friend, who he calls Nacedo. When Riverdog was a boy, Nacedo went into the sweat lodge, got very sick right away, and ran off into the desert. Riverdog defied the elders, followed Nacedo, and Nacedo shared some alien healing secrets with Riverdog.
Riverdog hands healing stones out to Michael and his friends and has them stand around a wagon wheel schematic with 5 spokes, then starts to offer them a wooden bowl of water to drink from. He tells them that the stones will let them connect their energy to Michael's and heal him. But when he gets to Liz, Riverdog tells her that because of her fear, her energy could hurt Michael, and he forces her to step back.
The other 4 activate their healing stones. Michael has visions of a similar 5-spoked wheel out in the desert and his friends, and of Max reaching out a hand to him, with them both as little kids and as teenagers. Both versions of Michael tear out of the webbing in the vision, and he walks off with Max's and the Isabels.
In the cave, Michael tears off the webbing and asks for the healing stones. He puts them into the holes in the cave wall where they make a glowing V shape over the symbols, like the stars in the sky he saw in his vision. He says that the symbols are a map.
On Liz's balcony, Max talks to her about fear and says that being with her cost him his balance. He tells her that he has to take a step back. Liz tells him that she's happy and sad all at the same time and kisses him to remember. Above her, we see the V constellation of stars.
Lots of good stuff this week.
Yes!
So, where would you like to start?
I very much want to start with the Liz stuff at the end because this bugs me.
Okay, yes.
I mean, in a lot of ways, the entire story is about people overcoming fear by coming together. That's Max and Michael and Isabel. That's kind of all of them coming together to save
Yeah,
Michael. But Liz is singled out.
sure.
Liz is told by Riverdog that her fear is different and for her to try to help Michael would hurt him. And she isn't given any idea of how to fight her fear. Instead, she is left out. And
Yeah, it bugs me because we kind of conflate it with
we
doubt
do.
when she talks to Max on the balcony, and those aren't the same thing.
No, they're not. I kind of feel as if, well, definitely that there's too much really going on in this episode for just one episode, and that a lot of it is being done specifically because they want to separate Max and Liz again for a little while.
Yeah, which is funny because we really only have the one storyline through this episode.
Yes,
Michael is sick, and that's our primary concern.
right.
But I agree. They sort of misstep with Liz and her fear because it feels, I want to say, undermotivated. I don't think we know sufficiently why it's there, and we definitely don't do enough with how she could potentially overcome it.
Yes, or indeed how she can explore it by herself. It is very much almost mansplained to her by Riverdog.
It really is a bit.
And kind of, yes,
Um,
if they wanted to explore it, I would want it to be kind of Liz coming to terms with it, coming to realize for herself that this is something that she can't help with until she works on herself first. That I think would feel a little bit better to me.
yes, or even if they doubled down a bit on Alex's uncertainty and opened up a space for discussion between them,
Yes.
and gave Liz someone she could talk through this stuff with.
Yes, that would definitely be interesting.
Because instead, what we do is we isolate her, and then we kind of, as you say, Riverdog mansplains ish what happens
Yes.
or how she's feeling.
Yes.
And we don't even really allow her to say, I feel X.
Yes.
I doubt this, I am afraid of this. She sort of says at one stage, I can't imagine anything terrible happening to you, but that's sort of after Max has said, you're afraid of what will happen to me.
Yes, yes. I do think that Max is projecting a lot of his own fears onto Liz. Because,
Yes, because he also says he is afraid this is how they die.
yes.
So we don't even need to explore Alex's uncertainty. We could explore Max's too. She has Max to talk to. She could talk to Alex. There's lots of things you could do with
Yes.
this story. We just aren't doing them.
Yes, and it really, really bugs me that it's an old man who is telling a young woman what she cannot do.
Yes. Um,
We cross the lines of privilege a little bit in that she's a young white woman and he's an old Indian man, but still.
yes, and he has some of the answers to their alien heritage, but it's not Liz's heritage, and it doesn't seem
Yes.
quite right.
Yes, and he never explains exactly why he knows this much about the dangers of the healing. If he had explained how at first he had tried to help and his fears got in the way, that would, I think, feel a little bit better motivated from his side. At the moment, it's just kind of he's doing the exposition because that's his job.
But especially because if he has a near death experience, or Nasato does, as a result of his fear, then you still open up room for this discussion of what it is to be afraid and how to overcome
Yes,
it.
yes.
And he can offer something insightful and useful to Liz instead of just, you are afraid, go stand in the corner.
Yes!
Which is what it amounts to.
It
Right?
really is. And even in Michael's vision, he sees Liz, but she is apart. She is not in the circle as the others are.
Which is weird because we've seen lines of connection between Liz and Michael
Yes.
before. It just, I don't know, it seems odd that her.
And it was almost even sweet the fact that he saw her and saw her smiling to Max and kind of almost a recognition that she had done her best, but it still just didn't quite go far enough.
Yeah, it's just, it's particularly strange because we've seen Liz looking out for him And I don't know, maybe it would work better if we transplanted this on hyperdramatic Maria, but I'm not sure it would.
No.
I just think it's a lost opportunity or
Yeah.
something. I think it's partly, well, as I say, they treat it like doubt
Yes.
at one point. Max does later. And that suggests a lack of belief, but that isn't Liz's
Yeah.
problem. So when we finally get to talking about it, we're still not talking about it because there seems to be confusion about what it is that makes Liz need to
Yes.
withdraw.
I think for one thing that if we really wanted to delve to this as deeply as possible, it shouldn't be Michael that gets sick, it should be Max.
Yes, that's it exactly, because she is afraid of what will happen to Max, but it's Michael that's potentially
Yes.
dying.
Yes, if it was Max who was apparently dying in front of her and if fear was paralyzing her, that would be one step. I would
That would
still
make
want
so
her
much
to
more
actually rise
sense.
above it and do something to help instead of being told to stand in the corner.
But I think if it was Max too, it would be, oh, easier's the wrong word, but there would be more of a chance of rallying her into action rather than passive
Right.
withdrawal. Whereas because this connection to Michael is kind of limited to warnings about the dubious guidance counselor,
Right.
it's harder to, I don't know, the lines of this particular wagon wheel aren't all there,
That
I
is
think.
true, yes. There is no denying. So, I think we can leave that part there. Is there something that you would like to bring up next?
They do some interesting imagery with the, if we go back a bit to the wagon wheel and the communal
Yes.
ball. This is me being hyper Anglo-Catholic, I realise, but I just instinctively went to, oh, that looks so very much like communion, and I'm sure it's lots of other cultures too, and I just don't
Right.
know them. But that was my immediate point of reference, and it was an interesting
Yeah.
one. Because the whole point of that, when you have the communal cup, as far as I understand it, is a symbol of unity.
Yes. And Riverdog calls that out. He talks about kind of the water being something that they all have in common, be they human or alien, which is a nice point.
It is. And of course, water endlessly is, representative of
Yes.
life-giving, renewing sort of things. So that's there too. I love the way they construct that scene. However I feel about what they do
Right.
with Liz, I do like the nuances they layer into this ritual, this alien healing
Right.
custom.
In Alien Power Watch, we have Isabel showing off her molecular manipulation again.
She does more or less just turn that into mustard, doesn't she?
Well, I have to admit, I'm wondering exactly what it will taste like.
Something deeply
Yes.
dubious.
Yes, it's clearly supposed to represent mustard with the color, but I had to wonder about.
Oh,
Yes.
I don't know. Some sort of sweet mustard, who knows? I like to think it's laced with Tabasco. Why not?
Yeah, the beginning kind of bugged me because it seemed as if there was no real reason for Max to be walking around with these symbols that he's never shown Michael in his school books.
Well, the plot says we must. What actually bothers me about that scene is that Michael, who's usually hyper anxious to keep the alien secret, doesn't seem to care that he's playing
In
20
public.
questions about all things alien
Right.
in the crashdown, yeah.
Yeah, that's another good point.
I mean, if anyone walks over and looks at those pictures, what? It's a school project? It's because Michael's bored of drawing geodesic domes? What do we say? Oh, they're symbolic of our secret alien language that we all recognize but nobody
It's
understands.
artwork for a game I'm working on.
I mean, why not? Do you know what? They're symbols for a podcast we're about to launch.
A little anachronistic, but okay.
Well, quite, yeah.
And in the scene next with Max and Michael and Isabel, I was kind of struck just by one little thing where Max leaves the room and Isabel goes to Michael and says, "You promised." And I was kind of thinking, did he? And I actually went back in the transcript and Michael says, "I won't go." To me, I'm not entirely sure if that counts as a promise.
No, that's not a promise. That's Michael saying, oh, all right,
Right.
I won't go. It'll shut you up.
Yeah,
You're about to go
yeah.
out of the room anyway. And I very definitely have
Yes.
ulterior plans here. I mean, we know Michael by now. He promised to answer Maria's questionnaire, too, and he made up all
Yes.
sorts of answers.
And there's a lot that's a little hard to track once we get to the reservation. I'm not exactly sure what it is that Riverdog was supposed to be throwing in the fire that gave us those nice, pretty pops of sparks.
Oh, see, I wondered if that was cedar, but I don't understand why, if it was cedar, it brought out the alien allergy.
Yeah, since it was, when he talked about it later, he implied that it was just from the heat and possibly the humidity, the sweat of the sweat lodge.
Yeah.
And I did think it was interesting that we have kind of this very underplayed notion of kind of the traditional Indian response to Nasado as opposed to Riverdog's young, impressionable youth response, where they were testing him as an alien spirit and he failed. And that basically seemed to have been just because he had a different physiological reaction than a human would, as you expect aliens to on certain occasions.
Yeah, I did wonder that when Michael bolted out of the
Right.
out of the sweat lodge. If Riverdog had started to realise that Michael was an alien or not. We definitely get a shot of him looking,
Yes.
well, something. I can't make up my mind what he's thinking about.
And on the other hand, we are also, I think, for the first time, starting to see the idea that Michael and the others are less alien than Nasado is.
Yes, we're starting to explore this idea. It'll be interesting to track that there's maybe a bit more human in them. Or at least just enough that they don't break out in reaction right away when confronted with that, with the sweat lodge and the heat of it.
And I actually really wanted to go back and see if I could make a list of all of the imagery that I could identify in Michael's vision sequences, because they're fascinating.
They are. And that's a new part of the visual language of the show, isn't it? We haven't had a desert flashback in quite that style before. But
we will, yes.
We'll get them again.
And I think even the same iconography with the balance wheel.
Yes, and the what Michael ends up deciding is a map. The icons from it at the end of the episode.
And I have to admit, I have never really understood exactly how stars in the sky help him with that identification of a map.
Oh, my note says, how does Michael get to this as a map? We just like a giant leap into narrativium because we have to.
Yes, well, I can certainly...
I wouldn't mind if Michael's... It just needs a line. When I had these visions, I saw X.
Right.
I think it's a map. Or something, you know?
Yeah, something to help us across that big intuitive leap. Yes.
I mean, it's a great intuitive leap, but... Yeah, you just have to buy it and go right along with the ride, because otherwise... It's not going to make any sense.
Yeah, and I do like kind of the connection between some of the dream imagery and the story Max tells Liz about Michael. Because this is almost, in a sense, a do-over. This is Michael's chance to go with Max and Isabel. Yes.
To take Max's hand. Yeah. No, I was thinking that too. We do the past a second time through, and he is able to take Max's hand this time. It's wonderful. And again, comes back to that sense of overcoming fears and coming together to get through fear, which is lovely and great. And I just wish we had more follow-through.
Yeah, we have several times with the entire gang kind of rallying around Michael every time he's showing symptoms, from the first time just after he's back from the reservation, and again when he's in the UFO museum.
Oh, I'd forgotten that one. I was almost going to say it's a 3-beat, but that would make it 4, surely.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's the UFO Center too. And there's at least 3 scenes at the crash down.
Yeah, well, not everyone's there at the UFO Center. They have to bring him to the crash down to find Liz and Maria, but yeah.
That's right.
And I have to say, I wondered why immediately after Riverdog said you have to get him here as quickly as possible, why exactly they had to have Liz and Max presumably driving all the way back just to see Michael in the cocoon, where surely at this point somebody could actually pick up the phone back in Roswell.
You'd think. Maybe it was before mobile, so it was definitely before podcasts.
Specifically...
Although, no, it's not, because Liz has one, doesn't she? We know this.
Yes, she was just before that.
It's one of those giant
Yes.
1990s.
She was just before that saying, nobody's picking up.
Oh, for
Yes.
goodness sake.
But I suppose,
Well, this is, I suppose, the problem with technology and
yeah,
tension,
yeah,
isn't it?
that especially kind of,
But we resolve it so quickly that
yeah,
I don't get the
yeah, it
build-up.
almost seems
For the
as
point
if
of the
they
build-up, I
are
suppose.
so new to having mobile phones in the hands of teenagers that they're not quite sure of how to work with them as well as possible.
Maybe that's it. Maybe they're trying the crash down landline and nobody's
Yeah.
within walking distance of it. Who knows?
And we have all of this stuff about kind of Isabel's protectiveness over Michael and her very clearly being threatened by Maria.
Well, admittedly, at this point, Maria's mixed up all the standard idioms because she thinks that you need to feed a fever and starve a cold, when in
Ah,
fact, I always heard it the other way round.
okay.
But I think, no, I think
Yes.
you're right. It's definitely more than
And
that.
I thought it was interesting that in the vision sequence, Maria kisses Michael and Isabel just hugs him, whereas when he actually wakes, he hugs Isabel, and Maria doesn't really get her chance so much, and she will in fact complain about that later.
Yes. I think we really play up the aliens as family this episode. We're starting to get a
We
sense
definitely
of
do.
the found family that we're creating. And we haven't quite integrated all our
Yeah,
humans into that yet.
we are.
But we're getting there.
On the other hand, I think that that will definitely get derailed somewhat by Max's decisions in that very last scene. And
Oh, of
again, he
course.
is very much projecting his own fears onto Liz. And he talks about taking a step back without ever being very clear what that means.
I was just going to say that. What on earth is he afraid of at this point? Is it death? Is it dying? Is it hurting Liz? Is it becoming a chrysalid? I'm not sure
Yes.
watching Max, honestly. And I'm not sure it's his fault so much as the
Yes. Yes,
writing
and
there.
it kind of seems to me as if this take a step back is going to be used to keep up the required levels of separation and angst between Michael and Liz until the plot determines that they get back together.
I think so. Well, they're dreadfully earnest, these two, so you lose all the fun of that if you put them together, because it's so
Oh,
lovely to see them
yes.
doing nice and normal
Yes, and
things.
the fact that they actually let Liz show competence. She is the one who is good at billiards because she understands the geometry of it.
Of course she is. Of course that's why. It makes so much sense. And we haven't really leveraged Liz as clever like that since she took those cheek cell samples.
Um, well, possibly the thing with Topolsky. I think we can give her some credit for that.
No, that's right. Yeah, I say a thing which is not. No, she's had a couple of inspired plans, but we haven't. I don't know. Seen, I
Yes,
suppose, and enjoying it. We
true.
haven't seen Liz happy in a long time. I feel like not as
Yes,
happy as she is there.
yes, and yeah, they almost turn kind of on their head some of the cliches about a man and a woman out playing billiards on a date, in the kind of usually it's the man who is coaching the woman through the difficult shots, and
Yes,
the flirting over the fortune cookies that they both make up instead
over
of
the
reading
fortune
what's actually in
cookies.
front of them. Though it's not called out, I am believing that that is the same set that they will refer to later as Senor Chow's. Yes.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
it's got a name,
And I always
possibly.
loved the kind of implication from that that they also serve Mexican as well as Chinese.
Yes, that's very good. See, I love this. I need to have a sense of what is where geographically and how everything fits together when I'm watching these
Right.
things, and I've never picked that up before. I shall build it into my geography of the village of Roswell or
Yes.
town
Yes. Well,
or
I don't
whatever
think
it
they
is.
ever say exactly where in Roswell Senor Chow's is or how far it is from the crash down, say. No.
No,
No.
it's not an easy place to map, really.
Yeah, Alex and Isabel are definitely getting off to a somewhat rocky start at this point. But being honest with each other does help.
It does. And I mean, we've said from the start that Isabel is
Yes.
sort of prickly on the outside, at least to start with. And Alex
Yes.
hasn't cracked that particular
Yes, I
nut
do like how
yet.
they kind of put out there the you're staring at me like you expect me to turn green and scaly, and never quite mentioned the other reason why Alex might be staring at Isabel.
Either she's forgotten or that's, if possible, more uncomfortable than the prospect of
Yes.
anticipating Green stealing us.
Right.
Each of the other or both. Although, having said that, as she's watching over Michael and he's getting increasingly ill, and she talks about how he and Max are all she has,
Oh,
her
yes.
vulnerability there
Yes.
is palpable. So it can be done. You can tap the
Yes.
center of Isabel
Yes.
occasionally. It's just
And between
not
that
often on
and
display.
Max's story, I'm very strongly reminded of the moment where Michael tells the story of how he and Isabel found each other again after being separated out in the desert for years.
That's a good catch actually, because that really reinforces this sense that they're not siblings particularly, but there's definitely a very special
Yeah.
bond these two share as
Yes.
friends that Max isn't
Yeah,
always
yeah, and
privy
I
to.
think I kind of have been getting the sense that they could be siblings for all they know. They are just not siblings under human law.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Oh, the one thing I did want to pull out, possibly for discussion, I don't know how much there is about it, but Max makes a comment when he's telling Liz the story of how they all came out of the pods, about how he and Isabel could communicate almost without speaking. And I'm wondering what we make of that. Do we file it under another possible alien power, or is that just their sense of family coming through in
Yeah, yeah, I
spades?
think that might be filed under the instinct that we've talked about before and that is definitely coming back here. They understand something about the way they moved at that point that they've lost now
Yeah,
because they've learned how to behave as humans instead.
that's an interesting idea. It's sort of like, well, like the symbols, I suppose, a thing they knew
Yes.
or a thing that makes sense to them, but now they just have a very
Yeah.
fuzzy, almost that candy floss dream feeling when you wake up from having,
Yeah.
it's still
Yeah, as
there,
far as
fuzzily,
yeah.
but
Alternatively, it
nothing
could have been
concrete.
actually something more directly like telepathy or empathy, at least, that they are psychically connected.
Yeah, I wondered about that. Well, they certainly display enough empathy
Right.
we've seen before from Max that that's possible.
The visions that Michael has are to a certain extent empathetic, reflecting the way that each of them are feeling about him at that moment, I think.
I think so. It's
Right.
sort of as the balance comes back in order that he
Yeah.
gets a sense of where they are. What do you think Nasedo meant? Just as we're talking about this has occurred to me, about how the balance could overcome you. So I don't think he meant they could all become web people.
No. I think he was kind of hinting at the idea that they are playing with very dangerous power here. That, for instance, either he said that the balance was energy, so for either one of the people with the stones to be putting too much of their energy in and not leaving enough for themselves, or possibly even for Michael to be getting too much and not being able to handle it, that either of those could be disastrous.
I see. Yeah, those are both compelling ideas. It would almost be interesting to see one or the other
No,
explored at some point, but I don't think we ever
no,
do.
we don't. I'm not sure if we even ever see the healing stones used again, which is. No, we definitely do. Yes.
We must.
Yes.
Well, we'll have to
Yes.
watch for them anyway.
Yes, we definitely get them called out in one of my favorite moments near the end of season one. Yeah, it's often seemed to me that kind of every time they're going into one of these dangerous adventures, it should kind of be okay, who's got the healing stones? Are they safely packed somewhere within reach? Because kind of like you would never know when you would need them.
Not a bad plan. Especially when you've got the FBI and
Yes.
spies and all sorts on your trail. But then maybe they need them to light up that map.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever used for that again, so.
No, I don't think they are.
Okay. So, should we talk MVPs?
Okay. Why not?
I am
You
not
got a
really sure, to
candidate?
be honest. I'm wondering about Shiri Appleby because, in spite of Liz being somewhat underserved by the plot, she really does knock it out of the park for what she's asked to do.
She does, and it's not her fault that she gets shunted into the corner by a lot of people who don't understand
Yes.
how to deal with her feeling doubtful.
Any counter argument?
To the one I just made. I think That's your job.
Hey, I nominated her in the first place. Okay.
Okay, fair enough. I think it had better be Liz. I'm not coming up with anybody else, and I don't really like her performance. And I'm too confused by Max, and Michael is a web person or possibly a chrysalid, so you know.
Yeah, Brendan Fair did well in the vision sequence, but a lot of the rest of the time he was just lying on the bed, so...
He just didn't have a lot to do, which also was not his fault.
And I think I want to take the first dibs on 5 healing stones as the rating for the episode.
Oh, I was going to say 2 cherry colas, so that's okay.
Okay, good enough.
If you agree or disagree with us, you can get in touch via Twitter at @alienscast, or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/alienscast, or visit our blog at alienscast.com.
If you enjoyed this episode, please link to us on your blog, your Twitter, your Facebook, wherever else you are on the internet. You can leave us a review on iTunes and help other Roswellians find us. Our theme music is Epic Trailer Intro by Honey Lemon.
This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. To find out more, search for Creative Commons.
I'm Chris Calworth.
And I'm Claire, and this is Illegal Aliens, a Roswell podcast. Join us next Monday, July 3rd, 2017, for a discussion of the 11th episode of Season 1, The Toy House.
In which Max picks the wrong cover story for how he put out a grease fire, we remember that Kyle plays basketball, and possibly Kyle is not the worst. We'll have to see.